Hello, everyone! Welcome to Tuesday and D. I am your host, Kay Purcell, and I'm joined by my incredible co-host and co-DM, David Lee, aka Full Rubber Ducky. Say hi to the nice folks, David.
Hello.
So, yes. Uh, oh, you know what I haven't done? I haven't opened Bardley. We don't have any pretty music playing. Hey, y'all, it's been a day. But yes, before we get started, I'm Kay. I talk about D&D every Tuesday here. And I also... Is this the one I like? I think this is the one I like. I also stream Mondays and stream Pokemon on Mondays with Shiny Hunts. And then starting here, hopefully sooner rather than later, we're going to be doing a bunch of actual plays. You can hear the ducky this time! Thanks for hanging out, Brian.
Hey.
So, before we get started, thank you to Web Captioner for the awesome captions that we have going down below. And thank you to Bardley.io for the music, which is setting the mood for us. David, anything that you have to promote?
Um, uh, Only the things that we are working on that we're not quite ready to announce yet, but soon. Soon.
Very excited. As always, join me on Sunday nights on Todd Mood Bounce's channel for, I know what this is called, for Mothership.
Mothership.
I should have pre-written a bunch of this, but you know what? It's been a day! Yeah, I'm KDamnFear. You can find me Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, KDamnFear. And, we got... Hey! How are you doing? Welcome! So, Candace put a little bit of a spicy meatball on my timeline. Yes, that old DM is my DM for Dead Planet. And, yeah, did bad things to Kai last episode. So that was fun. But we're going to talk about something. I'm going to link it so everyone can read it and have it for reference. I'm also going to just read it out, and then I'm excited because I'm excited to talk about this because I immediately got my Irish up, so to speak.
Yes.
And David was like, I don't know if this is enough to talk about, and I was like, oh yes it is. And that there was no role involved in one of those things. So, I
Not
love
that you could see.
David knows how much I do like to suffer. So,
Y- Yeah. Surprisingly, so much.
so
Yeah.
today we're going to dive into this is a short little Reddit post, and innocent on the surface, but oh boy do I have a lot to say about it. It is titled, How to Stop Flirty Players. And again, there's layers to this, and we're going to go through a bunch of it, but I'm going to read it out quickly. Posted, I came up with the perfect way to halt players who feel like they've got to get with every NPC. Imagine this. You're DMing again tonight, and everything is going swimmingly. You intro a very nice female NPC, and then Steve speaks up. Friggin' Steve is rolling to flirt. Here's a rule to stop Steve. Every time you want to seduce, you gotta look the DM directly in the eye and say it. It gets the rest of the table laughing too. Now, Damphy read that and went on an immediate rant about toxic masculinity. But that was not David's reaction. So, and we got layers to unpack here. So,
So, first let's preface this with and it's not necessarily a D&D thing, but it's more of a social thing. It's like Kay and I have always talked about social issues, and especially over the pandemic, we spoke about issues with race, issues with um, women, issues with accessibility, um, and lots of other connected issues. And the important thing to remember is always be open to other people's perspectives and other people's experiences. And even though I think I'm very good at not just listening to other people's experiences, but being open and aware and vigilant about it, I looked at this post and said to myself, well, you nip that in the bud in session zero. You 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 write up a charter at the beginning of your campaign and you say, listen, we're not going to do like the weird sexy things and then like move on from there. And I thought that was it. Um, but Kay saw a lot more issues and a lot more nuance to this post than I did. And when she laid it out to me, I was like, oh, that is a whole lot more pregnant with things that we need to address than I originally thought.
And let me be clear, I'm not diving in on this because like I want to attack this one person or this one post. I'm diving in on this because I get what this person is saying. I get they've laid out the problem they're trying to address. They figured out how their solution to it. Um and it should be simple, but they're saying a whole lot that they don't realize that they're saying. And they're doing a whole lot of gatekeeping that they probably don't realize they're doing. And they're also just like this, they're like brushing up against a realization that they could be having that they just aren't having. And it's no one's job to be correct and on the nose all the time, but I'd like to dive into a couple things about why it is kind of important to think about what you say and how you say it, because this is actually an incredibly gatekeepy post if you're not a dude, or if you're not a straight dude.
Right. And the first thing is what I thought was the obvious point is you will get people at your table who will do weird, creepy, uncomfortable things. And ostensibly, a post like this is how you out creep the creepers, or this is how you defend against these weird people who show up at your table.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my thought was, just don't have those people at your table, or say, hey, this isn't cool, and
Right.
to cut it off at the pass in your zero session and say, hey, these are the things that, and both Kay and I have spent quite some, like multiple meetings working on not just the content of our zero session charter, but also the specific wording of it. And we're not lawyers or anything like that, but we do want to be expansive and specific in the directions our games are going, what we expect from players, and what you can expect from us as DMs.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a whole lot more to it than that. And like I said, I didn't consider that at first blush, because my immediate thought was, oh my god, creepy guys, you have to stop these creatures out in the world. And yeah,
And
apparently there's a whole lot more to it.
I'm also going to say, like, this is very clearly a home game. This is, you know, friggin' Steve, right? They know each other really well. And there are things that are perfectly fine and acceptable in your home games at your own table, right? And every table is going to be different. And, like, if you're a bunch of all dude friends sitting around and your DM says, I don't want to deal, even if you're not being creepy, I don't want to deal with you. I don't want to have to do flirting. I don't want to have to be a female character flirting with your dude every 5 seconds. That is completely normal and understandable and absolutely a line that should be drawn in session zero, right? Like, or even, doesn't even have to be session zero. If it becomes really obvious really quick that, like, hey, anything that even is remotely female is getting relentlessly hit on, hey, maybe you consider your friends. But also, it's a fantasy setting, so maybe that's fine. But also, maybe halfway through the game, you're like, you know what? We're not doing that anymore. It's making me not enjoy the game, because you as a DM also have to enjoy the game.
It is never too late to draw boundaries, and it is never too late to withdraw consent.
In anything. But so, I'm diving in super deep on this, not to say you have to do this at all your home games, you and all your guy friends have to blah 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 blah. No. But if you're posting to the internet for everyone to see, maybe you should consider, especially if you're considering doing a game that's going to be streamed. So, first off, are your friends creepy and just absolutely hitting on every like what is this? I introduce there's very little detail, very few details here, but you introduce a nice female NPC. Okay, there's a lot we could spend an hour just unpacking that, right? Are you actually experiencing the experience of being female where you show up, you say hello and you smile politely and suddenly like are you this close to that realization that this is a common thing for women? Maybe you and your table could learn from that and have a discussion. But also, not everyone uses D&D that way. You don't have to. But as a woman, I'm just like, okay, so did you introduce a nice female character did you spend a whole lot of time describing their clothing, how high their boots go, how big their cleavage is? Because you're kind of I don't want to say asking for it, but you're setting yourself up for some flirtation if, you're doing George R. R. Martin level descriptions of how big their bodice is.
Right.
But also, if you're just every time you introduce a character that's like maybe potentially a woman, and everyone's jumping on it like a duck on a June bug, maybe there's something you can learn there. You don't have to learn it, but that's a point of consideration. Before I go on another rant, David, any thoughts on that?
It's my first thought is in character creation because D&D is interactive storytelling, you're going to end up going in directions that you didn't anticipate. And what I have found is that it's important when making a character to, one, give them agency, and two, to consider their goals, their objectives, their wants, their needs, and their desires. Because you will find yourself in a position where a character that you thought was, oh, well, this is just a person that forwards the story, all of a sudden they're getting questions about their interests, their background, their history, and they might end up being romanceable.
They
Because
might
you
end
never
up
know
being
what someone is going to key in on.
they might end up being a main character. I'm not without spoiling too much, Matt Mercer in hey Candace, welcome. We are chatting about the post that you shared and I have opinions. So like in campaign 2, Matt Mercer introduced a character that was lawful evil and was just supposed to be there to be a bad guy and ended up being one of the group. Like the entire party just went that one. And suddenly that character is a central character, went through an alignment change. Like it was so you never know what the party's going to latch onto, and it's never what you think it's going to be. Ever.
Right. And what I found in one of the home games that I've played is I built an NPC that, again, is supposed to be a quest giver, and not only was romanceable, like everyone in my party was like, oh, he's hot, but it was set up in such a way whereby that NPC ended up romancing another NPC because of because of trauma processing, because of grief recovery, and it unfolded into this whole backstory for this character who is now a central character in multiple modules in the games that I'm running, all because somebody was like, oh, well, he's hot, maybe he's into the other person that he spends time with. And I went, maybe he is. And then that just it was just off running from there. And so if you like man or woman or non-binary or whatever character you have to not just romance, but you have to be open to directions that your characters and your players will explore. and that includes, they might be like, oh, this is someone I'm interested in. And one of the heartbreaking things that I have as a DM is I go, okay, I'm gonna set up this person as a romantic interest for a character, and then that player goes, all right, he's fine, and then moves on, and you're just like, ooh, boy, do I not know anything about this whole romance thing.
Well, and speaking of, so again, we're going to go back. Zero session is really important, and it is completely valid for you as a DM to say, I don't want to deal with this romance thing, right? It's gonna, like, be upfront with your players. If and one of my DMs actually comes out and says, like, there are like 2 or 3 romanceable characters in every town. I'm not going to tell you which ones they are, right? If you're interested, let me know. If you fall in love with this random one, like, tell me somehow, right? Let me know. Don't just expect me to know because, like, I got to spend some time figuring out if we're doing this romance thing. If you're not into dealing with romance, I think a lot of players will skip it. And if people are getting creepy, there's no problem with saying new boundary. But, like, I'm not going to pretend like my characters don't try and romance anything. Poor David, my paladin of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, is as awkward as they come, and all she wants to do is romance up any lady type. Like, any lady type. She is pretty much immediately in love. And then the dwarf steals the girl by rolling the dice that I made for his player. But, tell us about that
Yes.
fun bit, David, because I know that doesn't give you
So,
any anxiety.
so your paladin is extremely awkward with women, which I can understand. Um, and there have been several times where I'm like, here's an opportunity for said paladin to maybe make a female acquaintance. And at one point, there was I made a blacksmith who, admittedly, is a hot chick. Like, she's strong, she's family oriented, she's
Very good at her
excellent,
craft.
right, and is a little flirty with out of towners. And I set up this whole thing where she needed a crucible setup, and it was super heavy. I'm like,
And
okay,
my girl's strong.
right, just massive amounts of strength, this is gonna be no problem. And then she rolls a dice and rolls like a 7, just something
I don't even
way
think it was
too
a
low.
7. It was like a 3. It was just
Right.
like, there was no saving it.
And so our dwarf fighter, who is purposefully oblivious from the player, was like, oh, I'll give you a hand. Rolls, I think, a nat 20. It was either nat 20 or dirty 20.
Yeah, rolled a dirty 20 to, like, impress her. And then David's like, or no, to just put the crucible in place. And then David's
And
like, roll me a
he
charisma check.
picks it up, takes it for both of you, puts it down, and then blacksmith lady stands back, puts her hands on her hips, and is like, And he ended up getting like enchanted cookware, like +1 cookware out of it, and
So-
a deal on some other stuff.
For those of you who don't know, I make dice. For Christmas, before this session, I made dice for everyone. And David's like, roll me a charisma check. And my friend, Kato, a little bit of hipster vibes. So I made him beautiful. I'm really proud of these dice. I made him, like, they're rose gold with flowers in them. And he's like, this is romance dice. I'm a roll it. Nat 20.
Yep.
It was beautiful.
And just instantly swoops this poor girl away from our lovable paladin.
And my poor Roxy is still like, I can be your wingman. Can I help you do anything? Like,
Yep.
Just-
Ship has sailed. It's too late.
no, being the wingman, she was ready. She's like, oh, I understand. What can I do to help?
And particularly hilarious is that they get back to the main city hub, end up in a bar, is making eyes at a bartender making eyes back, bunch of just failed charisma rolls.
Like
And
3 in a
then
row.
Right after that, nails an 18 on intimidation and completely stops a bar fight from happening. And actually, every intimidation roll that you've had,
I've
knock on wood,
I've never, yeah,
killed it.
knock on something that looks like wood. But all of this is to say, poor David here has to play flirtatious women against an awkward lesbian who is played by an asexual.
Yeah, pain. Oh, so much pain. So much pain. Especially when there is a high charisma woman who immediately spotted a tall drink of water and was like, I'm going to climb that tree. And has been in pursuit, in hot pursuit, ever since.
Relentlessly chasing the paladin who's like, this is too much, please don't perceive me. Also, I kind of like it, but it's just way too much.
Also, I put her paladin in a room with naked people fairly regularly. And...
It's terrible. This game is a horror game for my character and a normal game for
right.
everyone else. So, like, I'm saying that to say, I'm not saying don't flirt. I said this before. If I'm in the DM seat, you want to flirt, just let me know. I am the biggest flirt enabler ever. If Sophie was here, man, I set Orem. Wasn't Orem. Orem
No.
is from Critical Role.
Yes.
Her big
Ooh.
tiefling strong boy, and I love him.
Yes.
No tail tiefling.
Yes.
Help me out, Jen. Oh, I feel terrible.
Yeah.
Barbarian.
Uh,
Anyhow, he played with us in a one shot that I did, and starts flirting with the bartender, and I'm like, cool. And at this point, Sophie didn't know my DMing very well, and she's like, are you like, you're ace? Are you okay with? And I'm like, trust me, if you want to flirt, we'll do the flirt. Sophie's character in Godplane. Big, strong, tiefling barbarian.
Not Orem.
It's not Orem. I'm stuck on Orem, which is Critical Role, which is not right.
Yeah.
And I love him. Big emo boy. Ozum! Thank you! Yeah, like, so I'm not saying A, don't flirt. And I'm also not saying, like, flirting is bad, flirting is good. Like, flirting is good or bad depending upon your level of comfort, your DM's level of comfort, and everything that you have, like, worked out in the meantime. So, don't be creepy. Zero session, communication, all important. Anything else we have to talk about on, like, that topic of flirtation? And also, you were so close to figuring out the female experience of I exist, therefore everyone's going to hit on me.
Right. There is that. There is that. And yeah, it's absolutely, it's all about consent. And like I said earlier, you can draw new boundaries and withdraw consent whenever you like. The second you're like, this is too much for me. And another important thing to recognize is that both yourself and your players are going to be different at every session. Mm-hmm. Like, there are some weeks where I've checked in with players and gone, hey, how are you feeling this week? I know you had such and such going on. And they're like, oh, I'm really looking forward to this. I can't wait to step into this so I can, like, step away from my life. And there have been other weeks where it's like, listen, I'm feeling very low key this week. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling this way or that way. And I'll be like, all right, don't worry about it. I won't come at you hard with whatever we're doing this week. And there have also been times where I've sat down at the table and said, hey, players, this is how I'm feeling this week. I've been sick. I didn't plot out as thoroughly as I did, so, expect me to scramble a little bit, and so on. And so it's important to know, because you could say, usually I'm game for, like, all this, like, flirting, but I just broke up with my girlfriend and maybe I don't feel like doing that. Or, maybe I got shot down on Grindr 3 times in a row and that's never happened before, and so I'm feeling very bad about myself.
I've also known people who've been like, what? Okay, now it's behaving. I was like, oh no, my captions are not. I've also known people who've been like, I've had a bad day. I know that we've been, like, in an RP heavy. Is there any way you can just let me kill something? Can I just fight something? I just need to fight something. Yes. So
Uh,
Candace just said, and that's I was wrapping up this part of it before diving in because I'ma come in hot, and I think this is what scorched David's eyebrows off when I started going
yeah.
off with this. Which Candace just said, I think there's a very homophobic layer to that initial Reddit post too. Everyone else will laugh when the guy looks into the male GM's eyes and flirts. Why would it be funny? It smacks of heh 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 gay nonsense. Yes, that is that is the other thing. That is what lit me on fire. Because, and even if, and again, we talked about this, I have friends that I play D&D with that I will sit around that table and I will say things and I will make jokes that I would never make in a streamed campaign. There's
Oh,
a
absolutely.
comfort and a familiarity there, and if that's, I've known, I know some of the most, like, I don't want to say homophobic because it's not, but potentially problematic comments about gays that I've ever heard have come from individuals who identify as
Oh, absolutely.
gay in a setting where
Yeah.
everyone is safe and everyone right. But so every table is different, every space is different, but this set me off because this statement, like, this is so low-key homophobic and so gatekeeping. Like, if you, oh, no worries. um yeah, it's on the surface, at I know a lot of people who just read it and go like, yeah, then you'd have a session 0, and that's all they thought. But there's so many layers of, like, the female experience. You know, this low key homophobia, as well as just a straight up gatekeeping. Like, it's very problematic in a way that I think is so low key that a lot of people just go, yeah, have a 0 session, solved. Why we don't need a whole episode about this? And I'm like, ooh, I have opinions. I want to get spicy up in here.
And another thing to include, and I'm being very careful about it because I'm not nearly well informed enough about it, but people who are autistic often have trouble with eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
And also, people who are autistic often cannot easily be identified as such. Like, there are plenty of otherwise normal looking people that have autism. Like, we all probably know somebody with autism that we don't know they have autism.
Mm.
Except, again, one of the things is the eye contact thing doesn't work. And so that could be the sort of thing where it excludes a particular person
Hey, crew.
or makes them feel attacked.
Right.
Like with with gay people, or bi people, or people who have other perspectives and desires and natures about them that are easily disguised. Like, you can't look at someone and go, that person's gay, that person's straight. You can't know.
Right.
And so it's one thing if you're being racist and there's a black person at your table. um you know if
Mm-hmm.
you crack a racist joke, everyone's going to look at the black person to see if it's okay. But if you're gay and you're invisible in those spaces,
Mm-hmm.
then do you out yourself, or do you make it a particular point? Because there have been plenty of times where I, as a black person, have gone, man, I really wish this could just not be a thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually had that experience playing video games because I speak a certain way when I'm playing with strangers, and they can't immediately identify I'm black unless I want them to. And I've had people make some really just obnoxious comments that
Mm-hmm.
I've let go because I'm like, listen, I don't need them to know I'm black. So imagine if I was gay, or trans, or if I was disabled in some way that wasn't obvious,
Mm-hmm.
then that puts a whole lot of pressure on me to decide what path I want to take. Am I going to make this an issue? Am I going to hide this and feel embarrassed about it? Like, am I going to change my perspective on my friends or the people I'm playing with? Like, there's a whole lot there just with one seemingly throwaway comment.
And even in spaces where you feel like you know people, because like I spend a lot, I spent, I have a couple careers, and I've spent a lot of time in rooms with people who are primarily straight white men. And I fit in really well. Like, I have been one of the guys most of my life. And, but because I'm a woman, because I'm now starting to be more open about my asexuality, more and more people have come to me telling me, like, hey, I am this, hey, I am that. So I have been at a table, I have been in a space where a joke has been told against a person who is gay, disabled, bi, trans, but the rest of the space didn't know that. But I did. And so it is then like my duty as an ally to
To right the
say,
ship.
hey, that's not cool. And a lot of times the reaction has been, no, 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 this is a safe space. No one like that is here. And you can't look at the person whom you're defending, right? You have to
Right.
buckle down, and that puts even more stress on you to, oh, well, am I going to even be invited next time? Because now I'm the squeaky wheel. Now I'm the irate person. Now I'm like, so again, every table is different, and if you've talked about boundaries and if you know things about your friends, don't not make jokes with your friends when you know that it's a safe space. But if someone speaks up, keep in mind we are all struggling with things, and we are all fighting battles that is invisible to a lot of the world. And especially, as Candace said earlier, tabletop role playing is such an amazing tool to start exploring who you are, how you feel, what you like.
Oh
Maybe
Lord Jesus, the
I'm
number of
not the
times.
person I thought I was. You, David, you have an amazing story, and I don't know if you're comfortable sharing it on this. The
Which story?
the game that you were in where a bad thing happened, but it gave that character the high school game.
Oh, oh,
Like, you
oh,
should
yeah.
heavily censor
Mm,
it, right? But I don't know if you
yes.
can.
Um, long story short, in high school, and like we were all kids. Like, let me emphasize, we're a bunch of like dudes, mostly white dudes, in a room at a boarding school where a lot of suspect things happened. Like, ooh wee. Um, but friend of mine is gay, and the way he describes himself is queer as a football bat. Um, and except he presents as like a cowboy, like tight Wrangler jeans, big bushy beard, flannel shirt, heavy boots, loves to cut down trees. And he, one of his players, one of our mutual friends, said a lot of homophobic stuff both outside of the game and inside the game. And things happened in the game where that person's character both had a alignment change and a, I'm not going to say a sexuality change, but more of a discovery of liking things. There was an encounter with another man, and all of a sudden my DM is like, hey, you like men too. And that player got really irate, which to a certain extent is fair, because forcing people's characters to go in a direction they don't want to go is a whole other DM topic that we will cover. But um, it prompted this discussion where the DM said, "Wait, what's wrong with being gay?" And he let this kid have more than enough rope to hang himself. He went on this whole rant, and then he said, "So you're saying that people like me are bad and evil and disgusting?" Yeah. He's like, "What? Huh? What do you mean, people?" And then that was he again. He had come out to me before, but that's when he came out to everyone, and it basically made its way around the school after that. And he chose, this is the moment where I will make my stand. This is the moment where I will say, this is not okay. And I will use this game as a tool to say, hey, maybe reacting this way to people who feel differently than you, who have different attractions than you, isn't okay. And it was a lot. And it was very spicy. Fun fact: um, that that kid who was so voraciously homophobic. I don't know if he ended up being gay or bi or whatever, but at one point he was dating a dude and had lots of sexual experiences with dudes. Um, and I just thought that was a little funny that he was as spicy as he was when ultimately it's something that he ended up having an affinity for.
A lot of that really deep roiling hate comes from something that you're trying to like put down and ignore, like that, without getting extra super spicy. Look at the Republican Party.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, and again, like whether it's forced on you or it's something, I know so many people who like are like, oh, I'm gonna play. In fact, it was on Into the Motherlands, which is an amazing game by an all POC cast, crew, writers, everything. They're amazing. One of them was playing an android who used they them pronouns, and just she was an awesome lady, and then she played in Into the Motherlands for a year or two and then had the realization of, actually, I don't, this has taught me that I am not comfortable with she pronouns. I am they them. And I wouldn't have known that if I had not played this game. If I hadn't had this experience and felt what it felt like for someone to call me they instead of she. And it's there's an interesting, and part of me understands because there's an interesting reaction people have to people who are presenting as cis or presenting as, one of the binary genders, playing a character who is not straight or who uses they them pronouns. And often people rush in to attack that person. You aren't one of us, so therefore you can't play this character. And certainly there are boundaries that should be respected on anything that's not your personal space, right? I would never play a black character on a stream because that I can't. That's not my story to tell. That is, I would bring an unconscious bias, an unconscious incorrectness to all of it, even if I did my best and I did all that. Now, there's a space for, in a home game, if there is something and you want to try it out with your friends and you want to practice maybe some empathy, that's different. Right space, right context, also understanding that that will give you a little bit of understanding. It will never actually give you the lived experience. Clarify all that. But there are so many people who try these things out in roleplay because you spend so much time in these characters' shoes, in these characters' minds. You spend so much time learning who this character is and and learning about yourself through the decisions that these characters make. And would I make that? Would I not? So it's very dangerous, I think, to tell people because you do not identify as X, you cannot play X. There's also certainly a lot of problems where, like, I am a white woman and I'm going to play a black man because I've researched the experience of blah, blah, blah. No. No. Also not the same.
Um, so two things. One, I want to circle back to something that old DM said, and he mentions the card system, and you and I have talked about the card system, and I'm not sure if that's official in Adventurers League, but I know there are a couple of public places where the card system is implemented, and
It's not official, it's encouraged, or some kind of system is encouraged, but it's not like official.
right, and it's important, especially as an arbiter of these spaces, that you don't demand an explanation of why someone is uncomfortable. Like when we drafted the charter for Godplay,
And that was
we
a long one.
yeah, it was an extra long one because it was a horror campaign. But we also said to our players, look, you can give us a list of phobias and you can give us a list of things that you don't want to interact with, and that's 100% okay. But if you encounter something that makes you uncomfortable, tell us and we will move on. And there was an emphasis on we're not going to dig into um, why it is that you're uncomfortable with this or try to figure out specifically where the boundaries are drawn. We're just going to move on from there. And I actually have an interesting story from when I got arrested. uh, I was working for a guy under the table. I was doing a delivery for him, and I got pulled over and arrested, as one does. um, And I said to the officer, I was like, listen, I've got a bunch of merchandise for my boss. It was books, so it wasn't like I was dealing drugs. This was an actual job.
You say it in
And
a way where I'm like,
listen, listen. All of us have been around drugs before. We're not going to go there. And if you don't think you've been around drugs, look at your immunization record, because if you went to grade school, you've had drugs. But um, but I get pulled over, I get arrested. I'm like, hey, can I call my boss, let him know his product is here so he can come get it? And he says sure. And so he grabs my phone, dials my boss on my phone, puts it on speaker, and holds it up. And I'm like, hey boss, I've just been arrested. Your stuff is at location blah blah blah. Go get it after work, or send somebody to go get it, or whatever. And he's like, oh, what did you get arrested for? Was it this thing that you did? Was it this other thing that you did? Or what about that time you jaywalked? Which of these things did you? And I said, one, it's none of your goddamn business what I got arrested for. Two, I got arrested while doing a thing for you, so maybe slip me some bail money. And three, why am I going to admit to misdemeanors and felonies in front of a police officer? Like, maybe, just maybe, not only one, do you don't owe anyone an explanation for how you feel.
mm-hmm.
Two, um, you don't owe, or an explanation should not be demanded of you. And three, it's okay to be like, I'm not okay with this. The end.
It's also
And
completely okay to say, I'm not okay with this and I don't know why. I have to unpack that later,
right,
and I don't owe you that explanation even if after I unpack it. Also, welcome, Domo. Yes, we have all of the Zero Chill today. We are spicy.
absolutely. Oh, and another class of people that I actually ran it. So in D&D games, a popular theme that recurs is one, slavery, and two, sex work. And I have sat at a table with someone who I know used to be a sex worker. And I know many people who are former sex workers and a couple people who are current sex workers. And the portrayal at the table of sex workers at the time was really not okay. And again, I was in a similar position to Kay, where I had to speak up about this, but I couldn't like look at the person or acknowledge the person and out them and make a lot of noise about it. I'm like, listen, like, whether you call them courtesans or whatever you want to call them, high class, low class, whatever, um, there's a portrayal here where you have to be mindful and respectful. And then the same thing with slavery. Like it circles back to a discussion I read, I think on Reddit. It was either on Reddit or Twitter, where it was like, hey, I want to put racism in my games. And it's like, yes, you can put racism in your games, but you can't use that as an excuse to be racist and have fun with being racist and then hide behind, oh, well, that's what the character would say.
Yeah, that was what was the problem with Red Dead Redemption. online. Everyone's just like, do you, like the slogan became, do you know what year it is? Well, just so you know, like there were tons of black cowboys. There were black cowboys everywhere. Black
Hmm.
cowboys were bad ass. We love black cowboys here. So, no, you're wrong. You're racist and you're wrong. You're both.
Right.
Um, so Candace wrote something really, really awesome, and I want to read it out because I want to. There's so many. Y'all are so amazing. Thank you for talking with us. I was like, I don't know how well this is gonna go over, but I'm gonna get spicy on this topic because like, it's such a simple statement, and yet there's so much to it. There's so much to unpack in it. Candace said she's in a similar position with her home game. She has two players who chose to be black characters but aren't black people. One person just modeled their PC after a TV character, and the other is doing so because his kids are black and his character is a tribute to them. As a black GM, I give them context to their race in the world around them from my experience. It's surprisingly comfortable, and I didn't expect it at all. There's definitely an element of like when people are playing when men are playing women, I sometimes do have to like there's a context that has to be given. I don't want to out it because many of the people are here, but I don't want to out it. But like there was a game where they talked about in this world there's no patriarchy, and like my brain melted down. I'm like I don't know how to even function in a
What does that
world,
world even look like?
yeah, where there's no patriarchy. Like I literally cannot comprehend that because the fact that I am a woman against my will has shaped me from when I first had memories. I grew up in the South. Um, didn't figure out I was ace until I was in my late 20s. But knew I was very uncomfortable about a whole lot of things for various reasons, and there were various reasons. But like at 12 years old, at a family barbecue, or a neighbor's like Memorial Day barbecue, um, a man looked at me and I started getting hips at about 12 years old. I'm tiny up here, but I'm very I've got some hips. They started coming in at 12 years old, and a man looked at me, friend of a family friend, and said, "You're gonna make great linebackers one day." And it was terrifying, and it was like that is my first memory of just being like, oh, this is all I am to a lot of people. So the idea that that a world exists where people don't look at me and that's what they see, I can't comprehend it. I literally don't know how to play a game in that world. Yeah, it was a time. And oh, say what you're going to say, David.
Oh, no, continue.
Um and so the other look, if all D&D games could be as awesome as Steven Universe, right? Like, look, I'm gonna be honest. I haven't seen a whole lot of Steven Universe, right? But if everyone could be like, here's a thing, like, we can all turn into magical girl princesses and fight the bad guys, and then go back to being boys and girls or somewhere in between and change our. I'm for it. Let's just do it. Um. But so we talk about my paladin of the flying spaghetti monster, and she's half orc, and again, this is a home game. This is something, that I can explore because I have an amazing DM like David. And I recognize that Roxy, while, she is half orc, the orc side is definitely an acronym for the black experience, which I don't have, but I'm very much playing on that, like, people are racist against me, and I don't want to be this thing, right? This is the approach I'm having to it. And David, through amazing storytelling and amazing, like, he's not heavy-handed at all. Like, he'll say, like, because in this world, non-humans are very rare. So of our crew of 4, 3 of us are at least half not human. And David will be like, you don't know if it's a this thing or a that thing, but you know this is a race thing. And it's like, that's great because he doesn't have to, like, and granted, it might be therapeutic for you, David, to dig up some race trauma. I don't know, but you're not digging up race trauma. You're not throwing slurs around at the table, right? And also, I think those of us who have felt the felt that before, you know when someone is looking at you like other. Like, you can feel it. You don't have to tell me. Like, there was an amazing moment in Black Orange is the New Black, where the grandmother, like, they're finally breaking away from an abusive guy, and the grandmother says something racist, deliberately racist, and he's like, that doesn't even make sense. And she looks at him and she says, it's hate speech. It doesn't have to make sense. Right? Like, racism, sexism, it doesn't have to make sense. It's just there. And David gave me one of the most, because I'm white presenting. I mean, I'm not just white presenting. I am white. I look white. I am white. I have not had an experience, and I am truly American white. Like, yes, I have German ties somewhere back. Yes, I have Irish ties somewhere back. We thought it was Scottish. Turns out it's Irish. Oops. I don't have that culture that's deeply rooted. I am white. So people look at me and see me as I am in that respect. And David gave me this moment where my character met this woman who, like, was like, oh, you're a healer, let me teach you some herb stuff, and was like teaching my paladin, and she's like, this is so great, this is someone who's not judging me, she's going to teach me, she trusts me, this is awesome. And she teaches my paladin all this stuff, and we're sitting around the fire at one point, and she's telling us deep lore of why there are basically only humans in this world. And she looks at my character and says something about, like, orcs, and, like, looks at me and has, like, this expression, right? And my sweet, innocent, dumb paladin, who's just such a people pleaser and just wants to be liked, says, oh, I'm half, my mother's human. I'm half orc. And I don't remember exactly what she said, I wish I'd written it down, but she said something along the lines of, well, isn't that a neat trick? And it gave me, as a white person, that understanding of there are people who will be cordial to you, there are people who will teach you, but they still think of you as other and less. And that is something, I will never have the lived experience, but that is something that I can better internalize, understand, and identify now. And David gave me a gift that will hopefully make me a better ally in the future.
Now, speaking of allies, I'm going to bring up something controversial. Cis, straight, white men. They have a problem. They have a difficulty. And I think it's something that I think that's something that is marginalized, but that I definitely spend some time, like, many people have heard me say disparaging things about men because men are the worst. And many people have heard me say disparaging things about white people because, historically speaking, white people are the worst. But
you can punch up, just not down.
Right. But cis, straight white men are in a precarious position right now. And again, the whole, like, white tears thing and, like, the whole reverse racism thing is the whole, like, toxic masculinity and, like, the whole men thing. Like I will sit here and rant for hours about the problems that I have.
Pages in text.
But what we have to remember is, amongst all of the white men who claim to be allies, but then throw up their hands and go, this is too complicated, this is too tough, so I'm just going to go back to being a racist, sexist piece of shit. Excluding those people, there are white men out there who are doing their best and who come from backgrounds where they don't have experience with trans people, gay people, black people, Native Americans, and so on and so on, where they don't have a background with people with disabilities, people with invisible disabilities, understanding neurodivergence, and so on and so forth. And so for those men in specific, it feels like there are all of a sudden a whole lot more minds that they don't want to step on.
Hmm.
And it's easy for Kay as a woman and me as a black person to say, well, those minds have always been there, and you guys have just been tap dancing on them, and we haven't been able to say anything, and now we can say something. Now it's safe for us to say something. Like like my dad ended up in prison for confronting a white man over his racism. And my father and uncle both have been accosted by the police for smiling at a white woman, let alone talking to her. And for those white men, um, and only those white men, we have to be patient during the learning experience, because I know that even as well educated as I thought I was about feminist topics, the history of homosexuality, the history of transsexuality, and so many other issues. There's so much that I don't know, and so much of the lived experience that I don't have, that when Kay talks to me about it, or when my sister or other women, especially women of color, talk to me about it, I have to make sure to take a step back and open my ears and really listen and pay attention to what's being told to me, so that I can then internalize that and make that a part of my experience as well. And I at least have a frame of reference in that I am black and have experienced that. And so I can go, and Kay has experienced this a lot, where she'll be telling me about something and I'm like, oh, well, because of my race, such and such happened, so I get it.
Hmm.
But white men don't necessarily have that frame of reference.
Hmm.
And so we have to be a little patient with um, white men and anyone who is earnestly, uh, emphasis on earnestly, trying to understand where the lines are drawn, how to be respectful, and how to move through these communities.
And I will say, like, I'm not sure my captions are working anymore, which is frustrating me. I'm going to try to try to fix this and talk at the same time. Let's see how this goes. During like Black Lives Matter, a company I was working for gave spaces for us to go to. It wasn't quite a group therapy, um, but it was like it was a space where a safe space with an out of company moderator who would talk to us and give advice and and I went in there just spit and vinegar, ready to like rant and like how we gonna pull this together and what can we do to and like one of the first people to speak was this later middle age white guy who's like, I am learning that I'm a person of privilege. I have worked very hard my whole life to get where I am, and I have recently learned that like other people have it even harder than I do, and I didn't know this. And I am trying to grapple with my self-worth because if I have like and it was just this moment where I'm like, oh, you really should have known, but also the the thing about power structures is that when they work correctly, the people who benefit from them don't see them. So, and yes, there are a whole lot of bad faith actors. And this show, like we came in to this session ready to talk about this in particular, but like someone tweeted today about like someone came into my chat and the first thing they said was what is queer? And I explained, well, it's different for everyone, but for me it's, and they said, oh, thank you, the last place banned me as soon as I asked. And she's like, good. Like, this isn't necessarily the place for this, right?
Right.
There's a lot of bad faith actors, and there's a lot of outrage trolls, and like, there's all sorts of stuff. Um, so you do have to be careful. Oh, hey, they're working again. Yay. You do have to be careful. Protect yourself, protect your spaces, but like, there are people who earnestly want answers, and who it's really funny how many people who want answers don't seem to know how to use Google. don't seem to know that they can like buy a book like How to Be an Anti-Racist or So You Want to Talk About Race. Like there's some really good starter tools, and if you just point them in that direction, they're actually really happy. But part of me understands it because if you've it almost seems surreal to a lot of people that there is this massive power structure that they have benefited from that is completely invisible to them, but they're seeing the results of it, but they still can't fully see it. And if they're earnest, if they're not bad faith actors, it's good to help if you have the emotional capacity. That's also emotional labor that isn't necessarily your job to do. We're drifting a little bit here, but
One point I'd like to make is that while it is not our responsibility, I personally have felt it important to help curate the sort of resources that these inquisitive people look for, because there are a lot of slippery slope algorithms. Like it's a meme on the internet about how if you look up certain things on YouTube, that you will be directed to Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro.
right.
And you can go in an earnest effort to look for the positive or for the relevant positive information and then get misinformation.
Right.
And how facts can be corrupted to portray someone like, you know, the old like 50% or 70% of the prison population is black people, therefore and yet only 13% of the population is black, therefore black people are more prone to commit crime than, and it's like that's not true at all.
Yeah.
But the explanation for why that is much longer than the cutesy little factoid. um, and so it is important to curate those spaces. The other thing is, for especially for people who don't have a frame of reference, I find that it is particularly poignant and impressive upon these people when you not only give them personal experiences that you've had, but when you've been in places with them and say, hey, do you remember such and such? And they went, yeah, we had a great time that day. And then you go, well, this happened, this happened, this happened, and these things were all racist. And they go, oh, I didn't know. And finally, and a really, really important thing to remember is the fear associated with this, because it's not just fear of new things, but it's also fear of the realization that you have a massive near worldwide power structure built to serve you, and yet you are at the same level or behind people that that power structure does not serve, and possibly people that you look down upon. And that can be a tough thing to deal with. Like I've had more than one white person say to me, white privilege isn't real because I'm still poor. And I can't say to them, well, you just didn't work hard enough, because that's not fair, because also white privilege and patriarchy and racism and those power structures hurt white people too. And it's tough to explain to people why all of these prejudices hurt people. Like for instance, if homophobia wasn't a thing, think about how more relevant and important the contributions of Nicholas Tesla would have been, or the person who cracked the Enigma code, I believe was gay.
Yes. And like like the government forced him to chemically castrate himself, and just it's such a heartbreaking story. And
so on and so on.
It's also like it's part of the reason that a lot of white people love really big black celebrities. They can say, oh, well, of course black people can make it. Look at Rihanna. Rihanna did fine. You're just not working hard enough.
The absolute worst is when, and I'm going to say black people, but I've seen women do this too. when major black celebrities have the precisely wrong take about something, and I'm looking at Bill Cosby and I'm looking at Morgan Freeman, I'm especially looking at Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby having the nerve to fix his mouth and say, "Oh well, the black kids need to pull up their pants and do better." And it's like, maybe you don't have all the facts. And white people pointing to these people and saying, "See, your kind say this too," is also racist, because whenever there's a school shooter, whenever there's a terrorist who blows up a building in Oklahoma and it's a white guy, then that is a lone gunman, that is an isolated incident. But rich or poor, successful or failure, innocent or criminal, they represent all of us. So Bill Cosby saying you kids should pull up your pants then reflects to
Mm-hmm.
Bill Cosby speaks for the black community. Candace Owens speaks for the black community. And it's like, maybe we don't all think the same. Maybe we aren't all like that person.
And brace yourself, David, because I'm going to send you spinning out right here. Because I had a family member who, before, like in the horrors that were before the pandemic, because like we're in a different kind of horror now, though they're coming back. But when we were having like multiple mass shootings every week in that stretch before the pandemic, there was an announcement of another mass shooter, and I had a family member like text out, "Please don't let it be another white guy.
Yeah.
Don't let it be another white shooter."
Yeah, kaboom.
I was like, there is not an emoticon to.
Yep, absolutely.
So, yeah, so circling all this back, because while this post itself did not touch on racism, we're aware, we don't know. And again, while maybe in the context of this group of friends, maybe it is funny because Steve is obnoxiously straight and married, and everyone else at the table is aware of this and loosey-goosey, comfortable with their sexuality, and it's just funny because Steve is so uptight. So making Steve look the DM in the eye and say, "I would like to seduce you," is funny. I know I laugh anytime I'm like, "David, Roxy's gonna make a move on her."
And I shatter into a million pieces.
And that's not because I'm making David play a woman. That's not because women liking women is weird. That's because David has agreed to take on potential love interests, even though it makes him uncomfortable. And it's fun because we are all trusting each other. We are all playing a game and telling a story together. And we know the dice are going to fuck up my attempt at romance anyway. So it becomes a matter of how is Roxy going to screw it up this time. But, and again, this is a very short, we have now been talking for an hour, more than an hour, about a post that I should have dropped this into word count. Let's see how many words are in this. Like, I would actually like to know that.
And while you're doing that, I am curious to say, I want to say, it's not that like women liking women is weird. Honestly, if you ask me, women liking men is weird, because have you met men? And it circles back to something I've said repeatedly. Sexuality can't be a choice, because if sexuality was a choice, there'd be about 6 straight women and the entire race would end. Like, there'd be no more humans.
So we've been talking for an hour and a bit about an 80-word post. But and again, it was something that could have been funny, and it could have been fine and fun in the right context, but in the greater context of making an inclusive space, of bringing people. My last episode, we talked about newbies and why newbies are awesome and why they're important and how much fun they can bring and the challenges that are also opportunities, and keeping the game alive. We can't keep playing if everyone is dying out or leaving the thing and no one's coming in to replace them, right? This is a very dudes at a table statement, which is fine if it's the right dudes at a table and it's a safe. But in a greater context like this, no one who's questioning their sexuality is going to want to play at this table. Or any table, because from just reading that, if you're not well versed in tabletop, you're going to extrapolate that I have to look someone in the eye, and everyone's going to laugh at me if I try and seduce someone, man or woman. If I try and flirt with anyone, man or woman, I'm going to be judged because either I'm flirting with a guy or I'm flirting with a girl played by a guy, and either way, gay is funny in this setting, so I'm not okay to be here. And as a woman, what does this tell me? Oh, well, Steve's a creep and he hits on every woman who's a character, so of course he's going to hit on every woman at the table too. Like, when I interview for streams I'm going to be on, one of the questions I ask is, do you allow people to play genders other than what they represent, what they present as? Because if they tell me no, I know I probably don't want to play there, because I don't just want to be the love interest. I spend enough time under the male gaze in real life of just like, can I get with that? And go.
And that's important because, one, I would not want to sit at a table that had that sort of restriction. But also, especially publicly, especially on any sort of stream, I am not going to play a character that is not my gender. I will play something that isn't my race, but I will not play something that isn't my gender. And that is a personal preference for me because that's something that I don't feel comfortable with, especially in public. But Kay and everybody who knows me and who's watched me play a video game knows that 90% of the avatars I make in games are women. Why? Because if I'm going to spend 120 hours looking at something in a game, it's not going to be a dude's ass. But there's a big fundamental difference between that and me playing a woman character, like an actual female character, especially when I run into all of the problematic masculinity stuff that I have rooted in me, whereby I play someone who is hyper feminine, or someone who is overly sexualized, or I play a woman from the perspective of like sort of like toxic idealization from a man's perspective. Like, that's a minefield that I can't even begin to navigate. So I'm not going to try to do it, especially in a public forum where I am trying to not just present myself authentically, but to model behavior that I want to see in the world. Like, part of why I want to be inclusive, part of why I want to be careful in the language I use and in the insinuations I make, is because I want to make a safe space for everyone to play in, and I want everyone who watches me to take away the message, make a safe space for everyone to play.
And I'm going to make one more point before we start winding this down. And that is not to say the person who posted this is not bad, and they certainly don't need to be canceled. We hope that they would take from this that maybe there's some things about their lives that they should think about. But especially in a space, a TTRPG space, even if you come in with the best of intentions, even if you're playing authentically, even if you're whatever, you're gonna make a bad or a wrong choice. You are gonna say something wrong. You are going to represent something wrong. You are going to make a wrong assumption that even if you, like, you're going to say something that's going to make people make assumptions about you, even if you didn't actually make that assumption, it's going to be put with you because your thought process, your logic, the way you got there wasn't right. You're going to do a voice that you intended to sound like this particular thing, but it came out sounding like it could have been a racial caricature. That was not your intention, but that's how it sounded, and that's how people took it, right? This is true of tabletop. This is true of real life. You are not going to be perfect. You are going to make mistakes. We are living in a world where we are so socially aware that things are changing quickly, and it is difficult, if not impossible, to keep up with all of it. So don't not do something because it could potentially be bad. But before you do something, do your research, make sure that this is something that you can correctly represent, make sure this is a story that's yours to tell, especially if you're going public with it. If you're playing it to learn, make sure you've made that clear and you're open with that and you are playing with someone who can actually teach you. I don't need to be playing a half orc who's dealing with a racist society narrated by a white guy. I just don't. Maybe the white guy has a background in racial studies and like, that maybe that. But you are going to mess up. You are going to make mistakes. You are going to do things that you feel bad about. And if you are lucky, you will have friends who will call you out on it. If that happens, when that happens, take the time to listen, take the time to internalize, take the time to learn, and take the time to try and do better. When people call you out on it, it's because they think, as we saw from this chat, when we were talking earlier about people coming in and asking questions in chat and like how it's emotional labor to educate people and it's not my job and I don't mind doing it if the person seems earnest. But if people are willing to do that, then that means they think you are worth their time and their effort. So take that as someone being incredibly kind to you, because I promise you, they are not enjoying that conversation. They are not calling you out about this because they are excited to like put you in your place. If they are playing a game with you, they are nervous. There's a knot in their stomach. They want to keep this friendship. They want you to be a better person, and that's why they're doing it. So the thing I like to say is 10% better every day. You are going to mess it up, but if you mess up today and you can be 10% better tomorrow, then you're 10% better. And you're not 100%. And that's the thing about allyship. You're never going to be 100%. You're never going to be done. You are never going to be the perfect ally. I mess up all the time. I misgendered one of my best friends when I first met them. But you know what? I've never done it since. They were nice enough to correct me. I apologized. They were nice enough to forgive me, and we have gone on to become some of the best friends. If you're lucky, you'll have people who will educate you, forgive you, and remain your friend. We don't always get lucky. Sometimes you say something that is so unintentionally hurtful that that friendship can't continue. And that is a lesson to you that you want these amazing people in your life. So put forward the work to be the person that is worthy of those people in your life. And that's my lecture.
I do want to say one more thing about the post in particular. When Kay and I were first discussing this topic to bring onto the stream, we both mentioned that this is emblematic of a recurring theme in the community. So let's be clear that, again, we're not attacking this particular user or anything like that, but that this is just the latest of many, 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 many examples that we have seen. So when now and in the future, when we or anyone capitalizes on a particular someone saying something or doing something, that we don't necessarily want to attack that person. We're just using this as a teachable moment, using it as an example, a specific example of a much broader theme that we have observed. And also, let us not disparage people who have their awful, terrible, no good jokes in private life. Like anybody who knows me personally knows that I say some off-color stuff all the time, and I think I am hilarious. I make myself laugh all the time. Um, but I only make those jokes with people who understand
Mhm.
that I have no bias against black people. I have no bias against white people or women or trans or gay or bi or whatever makes you different, whatever people in grade school and high school would single you out for, then for me, that is something that adds, that does not define you, but adds dimension to who you are as a person. And it is important for me, one, to respect that, and two, for the people in my life to know that I respect that. Like, um, even after all the time that I've known Kay, I still check in with her about like ace things. Like when we fired up the uh, our home game, she was like, "Yeah, my character maybe, I don't know, is sort of discovering that she's kind of into women." I'm like, "Listen, Miss Ace Lady over here, are you okay with this?" And she's like, "Yeah, this is fine." But I made sure to stop and check in because that aspect of her is something that I want to respect. And and it's also something that I'm not terribly informed on. And so I want to make sure that I am stepping carefully into that space.
And I mentioned this earlier too, like with Steph and Ozem, right? Like even as a DM, like she was like, he says to the bartender, da, 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 and I'm like, the bartender leans in and is like, oh, well, and she's like checking in with me as the DM, going like, yo, are you okay with this? Because I know you're Ace. And I'm like, oh, I'm Ace, but I'm the biggest shipper in the world. I want everyone to be with everyone they want to be with in a safe and consensual way. I just don't want to be part of it. And that's not how a lot of ace people are. There's a lot of ace people who are like, so everyone is different. Monoliths don't exist anywhere. Um, but yeah, it's important that we have these conversations. It's important that we reach out to the people who are earnestly trying to learn. I've spent a lot of time. I actually had to have a conversation with one of my friends about when, for those of you who don't know, a while back, Matt Mercer was given a role on a one shot, and they gave him a pre made character who was of an Asian descent. I don't remember exactly which one. And Matt Mercer was like, I'm out. I can't do it. I'm giving it to someone else. And my friend was like, why? Why is it bad? Like, it's a pre made thing. Like, a not white person gave him that role. And I'm like, unconscious bias, like he's like, I don't want to be constrained in what I play in my home games. And I'm like, you don't have to be constrained in what you play in your home games. But if you're Matt Mercer and you're playing, like, I thought it was so cool to see someone with of that profile say, I'm not equipped to play this character. And I think more of us should, again, in the right spaces, play those. Try it out. Try and learn what you can, knowing that it's not lived experience, knowing that it's still a mask you take off at the end of the day. But it's amazing. And let me say, chat. Oh my goodness, Candace, Jen, Rich, Domo, thank you all so much for Jess. Thank you for hanging out and having these conversations because they're they're weird and that they're difficult conversations to have, but they're also so thrilling, and it's validating, but it's also so easy to flash completely over to anger and finger pointing, and it's so against our human nature to try and see both sides. It's so against our human nature to be like, this is a problem, but it could be an innocent problem, doesn't mean it doesn't need to be fixed, right? And having these conversations is just, it's so good. I learned so much every time I talk about this. Like, I am a white woman who is straight presenting, so I have so much to learn. And the fact that David and so many of my friends from so many diverse backgrounds will have these conversations with me, will give me the information so I can carry it forward into the spaces where I am, it's only white people, and I am able to say with confidence, with an understanding, this isn't okay. I can't tell you, I don't have the ability to tell you all the details of why, but here's where you can go to start learning. Like, if I didn't have these kinds of conversations, I couldn't do what I want to do in the spaces I want to do them in. So genuinely thank you for letting me rant about some of these things because it helps me learn so much. And I'm so grateful to you all. David, I know
Um,
you got something to say.
I do. Absolutely, it's important to. So what I have found, not just in learning about the experiences of others, like things I've learned from you and other people about gay experiences, trans experiences, feminism, and I've learned an astonishing amount about what's happening with Native Americans because of a friend of mine. Um, there, it also highlights not just what I don't know about other experiences, but what I don't know necessarily about my own history and the struggles that myself and my ancestors have had. And it has prompted me to go and educate myself better. And it has prompted me to go and not just seek other resources, both like personal, like talking to people I know, and literature, but also to reach out and connect with people based on their experiences. Like I've talked to my sister about troubles that she's had in medical community because of conversations I've had with women and black women about their medical experiences. I've gone and talked to my dad and written him long emails and had long conversations with him about what it actually was like growing up in segregation, and not just using the fountains and all the other things that you learn about in textbooks,
Mm.
but actual experiences he had, actual encounters he had,
Mm.
and the differences regionally. Like there'd be one city he could go in where it was kind of okay, and another city where it was a problem, and even in the military, and so on and so on. Remember that when you're talking to these people, if they're approaching it with the right mindset, while you are learning something from them, they are getting something to they're getting a sense that they're making the world a better place, but also getting the inspiration and the insight to go and dig deeper and to learn more and to look at their blind spots and fill those in. And that's really important,
And
at least for me.
I'm going to say this as speaking for all of the whites. I'm not speaking for all of the whites. But as a white person who grew up in a space where race was not talked about, saying anyone's race was a bad and scary and dirty thing. You weren't supposed to be racist, so that meant you weren't allowed to see race. So if you do have someone who's uneducated, white, whatever their background is, who's coming to you to talk about this, and it's not your responsibility, but if you have the energy, if you are willing to do the emotional labor, I know it is taxing and I know it's a lot of work, but be aware that for a lot of people who are earnestly seeking answers, it is so uncomfortable to even mention that someone is black or someone. I literally thought that Mexican was like a bad word in until I was in college. Because growing up in Texas, and it would be like, oh, he married a Mexican. And while a lot of white people will say really dumb things and like touch black people's hair without permission, and what the hell is wrong with that? But at the same time, they would never say, oh, or oh, she's got a black boyfriend. And that's as much as race is ever discussed. So to this day, I have so much trouble identifying between so many different races because it was never discussed. And I missed out on understanding all of these amazing different cultures and all of these amazing different sub things that I'm now trying to learn because race was a dirty thing and race was something that you weren't supposed to see. And it's hurt me as a human being. So I don't know if that gives anyone who's taking on the burden of this emotional labor any kind of insight, but like, yes, educate, but if you can also help celebrate, we're eager to learn that. Because I grew up without any understanding. I didn't know the difference between Mexicans and Puerto Ricans. I really didn't. I really didn't until I became best friends with a gay Puerto Rican opera singer. And wow, did I learn a lot fast. And it was amazing. So, if that gives any insight, if you're taking on this burden, like many of us really do appreciate it. And I'm so grateful to David. I'm so grateful, Candace, Jen. I've had Ben, who's not hanging out here, but I've had so many people who've taken the time to educate me, whether directly through David and I have had some really intense direct conversations, or just indirectly by just introducing me to your culture, telling me to check out these other things, or oh, have you ever heard of this food? No, you go find it, go try it. It's wonderful, and thank you. I've said thank you too many times now, but
Also, Candace, thank you for the easiest topic conversation we have ever had.
right?
Because, yeah, every week we have a whole list of things that we are going to eventually talk about on the show. But every week we sort of have like a back and forth. Okay, so we talked about this last week. What are we going to lead into this week? And this week it was just like, hey, look what showed up on my timeline. Boop, this is what we're talking about. The end. So yeah, thank you for the easy lobbed ball that we were able to engage in this week.
Yeah, that comment section is such a mess. And again, because again, it's such a. There were so many layers in those 80 words. Y'all, that was 80 words. But yes, so this is a Tuesday D&D. This is a talk show. We talk about anything around D&D. If you have a topic you'd like us to talk about, please ping me. Any of you in the chat, I would love to have any of you come on and talk about, be it a system. I'm hoping to bring on D'Angelo, who's gonna tell us about Emerald Templars, which is an amazing system that he's putting together. I'd love to have Rich on to talk about some of the amazing indie systems he runs. If any of you have even
Absolutely.
experiences, like whatever topics you want, we can do a 2-up, a 3-up. Like, this is a space to talk about D&D, to talk about tabletop RPGs, and the various ways in which it impacts us. So, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Thank you, Candace, for the amazing topic. And thank you, chat. Thank you so much, each and every one of you, for sharing your stories and your personal, like, it means so much, and you don't owe us that. But you gave us that piece of yourself anyway. And thank you.
Yes, we absolutely appreciate it. And we also appreciate Web Captioner, Bardly.io. Am I missing anybody?
I think that's it. I mean, OBS. Thank you, OBS.
Most of the time.
Most
Occasionally,
of the time.
Yeah, but most of the time,
We've
yes,
had some moments.
very grateful.
But yes, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. We got anyone? We got anyone we can raid to? Let's keep some love going tonight, maybe. Not too many folks on tonight. Out of curiosity, is this safe to talk about politics? So I am happy to talk about politics, how it interacts with games, where it overlaps with things that we're studying in TTRPGs or in games or whatever. If your main topic is, I want to talk about this particular thing, that's not really, I am not a political expert. I cannot go in depth about politics and how all that falls out. I try to keep abreast of things, but I don't think this is the best place for politics. If we're talking about Final Fantasy VII, then yeah, we're gonna have to get a little bit political.
Yeah, if we're talking about Tifa, the Italian Parliament, like, we're gonna have to have a little conversation about politics. But my first thought when you brought up that question is the political thing that I am most educated about, which is race and the history of race relations in the United States. And I am educated enough to know that I cannot speak with authority in a public forum about it. So,
Right.
as a general rule, that I am not going to necessarily feel comfortable really digging into current specific politics. Now, off stream, you can catch me calling Ronald Reagan a douchebag a lot, but you're not going to. And and listen, there's been a lot of Slav jank out of the former Soviet bloc in gaming, and I'd argue that it is a very important part of gaming history, especially when you're talking about FPSs. Um, and and then yeah, we're talking about there are two major game companies in Poland, I believe, um,
I mean,
because
look,
you have CD Projekt Red.
be
Oh yeah,
careful. I mean,
Shinra.
look, I fuck Shinra, but also the Turks. I love the Turks. So like, I
Right.
have to draw a line. I have to draw a line with my boy.
Um, but but yeah, you have Escape from Tarkov. You have I think the people who made Dying Light are former Soviet bloc. You have CD Projekt Red. Like there's a lot of the game space, both now and
Hmm.
in the history of gaming, where we attribute a lot um, to those countries and those areas, and there's a enormous cultural positive cultural impact that their contributions have made. Like I binged season 1 and 2 of The Witcher straight, and anything that provides me Henry Cavill dirty and shirtless for hours, I fully stand that. So
And I mean,
as
I will say I work for a company that's based out of Sweden, and I have many coworkers who are both Ukrainian and trying to escape the country, and I have coworkers who are Russian and who are unable to work because of the sanctions. Um, from DeviantArt, a whole lot of our coders were Eastern Bloc. You know, one of my best friends lives in Georgia, not the state, the country, and you know, I'm checking in with him because that very well could head there next. So, um, for me, this is something of a. It's a little direct and personal, and the big thing I will say right now is the actions of the Russian government do not necessarily represent the will of the people. Um, so please be careful and cautious about. Um, yeah, Youngles has talent in Europe, both also. Yeah. Um, remember, there are real humans behind this, and many of those humans are like what they want is not being represented by what is being done. Um, and we all have opinions. We all have hindsight is everything. We all have an incredibly zoomed out view, and we all have a tiny sliver of the information that's actually at hand. So be aware that this is a very global space, and a lot of people are more directly impacted by this kind of thing than you might realize. And also, personally, in any spaces where I am, I have, like in my Discord, I've said like, if you feel the need to sit down and say what we have to do, what we should do, what should be done, the way to fix this is, just don't. Because whatever you think you know is going to fix it, you don't. None of us know enough. Um, we are dealing with unstable, unstable things. Things are changing quickly, and just remember that we can all speculate, we can all talk really big, but this situation is going to unfold in ways that none of us could predict. It's going to result in a lot of heartache, and please just remember that there are people on the other end of it.
um, one thing I'd like to add, which stems from my uh, decades ago study of the Japanese internment camps, which was later um, brought up, reminded me of with George Takei and talking about his experiences in said internment camps, is that there are, especially if you're in the United States, you live, especially if you're in the United States and you live on a coastal city, you live in an international community. Like I can go outside on on my porch, throw a rock, and hit Little Ethiopia. I have spent a lot of time in Little Tokyo and downtown,
Hmm.
and in large Chinese populations.
K-Town is
In
right there for me.
right, K Town is again right there for me, and I have an unhealthy obsession with Korean dumplings now. But there's a large population of Russians in West Hollywood, and West Hollywood is right there. And it's important for us to remember, and I'm glad that when I thought about it, I considered it this way, that those Russians are part of my community.
Hmm.
Like, they are part of my city, my town, my community, and they deserve just as much, if not more, support from me and other community members than before. So just like the Japanese, where people used the animosity in World War II to um, oppress and exploit Japanese communities in the United States, um, it's important for me not only to support Ukrainian efforts and the Ukrainian communities that we have here, but also the Russian communities that we have here, because they're not responsible for this.
Hmm.
They didn't sit on a board and push a button and write an order to put tanks on the border. They're
And
just like mom and pops who are like trying to sell pierogies to get by, and
and
pierogies are delicious.
there's also, we as Americans have a certain understanding of nationality and national pride and what it is to be American. And that kind of nationalism and that kind of understanding is not universal. Um, so there's we're looking at this from a very American perspective when it comes to identifying as your heritage, your nationality, being taking pride or shame in what your country does. Um, that might not even exist in the same way for other people. So I said I didn't want to get super political. We got rather political here.
Yep.
But hey, I said it was a spicy night. So the answer is like, also, my heart goes out to every person in Russia who is just trying to survive, but who needs their ties to the outside world, and all of these sanctions against Russia are going to hurt them. Um, Again, if there's a better way, I don't know it, and I don't want to anyone to go down a rabbit hole of the better way to do it is what they should do because we don't know it. Just feel for these people, support people where you can, and be kind. We are all, remember, everyone has been through a world-changing pandemic already. And now they are also, this is why I talk about microaggressions or racism, right? Like, we all have been through all of this, and some people have more on top of it. So remember that there are people behind everything. Support people where you can, and be kind.
And remember that fear reverberates in places that you don't necessarily expect, because there's a mom in Nebraska who is going to discover that some price for something that she needs is going to be more expensive because of the sanctions in Russia. You work for a Swedish company, and there are a bunch of Swedish people who are terrified of what's about to happen. I have a friend in Hungary who is terrified about what's going to happen, and you know they're not Ukrainian. They're not currently being invaded by Russia, and there are a bunch of Russian people who may not necessarily be out and about, protesting, but who are at home afraid. And I have another friend who he has friends and family all over the Soviet bloc, Estonia, Latvia, Ukraine, and so on. And he's terrified for his friends. And so there are so many different layers of reverberation that major world events have. And it is important that we are patient and kind and generous to everyone who may or may not be involved.
And yeah, that's our not political talk.
Yeah.
But yes, and again, Candace and Jen have continued to share some amazing, wonderful experiences and thoughts and comments in the chat. Thank you all so much. I expected tonight to be spicy. I didn't expect to feel. I feel like I told David, I've had a bad day. It's been a really rough day, and I feel lighter after this stream. I literally feel like I'm not 100%, but there's a weight that's come off, and that is in no small part because you all hung out and thought and talked and shared, and I'm not screaming into the void. Thank you. It's all because of you. So, uh, I love you all. Thank you, chat. If you watch this later on YouTube and this sparks something, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I hope we've, given you some stuff to think about. Thank you for the cheer, Candace. I missed it earlier. My thing didn't go off. Grr. If anyone has any closing thoughts or closing comments, we have gone almost 2 hours, so I should probably wrap this up. We love you guys. Thank you so much. So, as before, I'm Kay Purcell. I've been your hostess with the most... Youngles! Stop gifting! Stop gifting subs! You were so nice, Jen! Thank you! Jen! Thank you!
Oh, sweet.
And thank you for hanging out, Jess. Thank you to everyone for hanging out. Domo, thank you for coming by. I don't know if you're still here, but thank you. It was so great to see you in chat. I'm so honored to have this community. I'm so lucky that I get to have these talks, and I'm so grateful to all of you. Jen, so you can find me on Sunday nights. I play Kai over at Todd Moonbounce's channel for Dead Planet Mothership. Mondays I stream shiny Pokemon hunts right here, and if you want perfect or shiny Pokemon, come hang out. I give them away then. And Tuesdays, I do this, Tuesday D&D Talk Show, and then it will be interspersed with some actual plays. I know that Jen is planning on maybe doing a stream on her channel or guest DMing on maybe she'll guest DM on my channel. I don't know. It'll be fun. I'll be real excited to see. So yes, KDamnFear, Twitch, Twitter, and TikTok. David, what do you got?
You can find me on Twitter at FullRubberDucky. It has currently been a little dark for a while just because I am planning something with Kay, but keep your eye there for announcements. Otherwise, you can find me here listening very attentively to what Kay has to say about all things D&D, and otherwise stay tuned.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I have the great honor of playing Mothership with Jen, Youngles, and Candace the Magnificent, who are in this chat. And yeah, my face makeup is like white paint, silver paint, and eyeliner, and that's all it is. But it looks better, so thank you. It's amazing what a screen can do. This has been amazing. Thank you all for hanging out. You all are so amazing. I might have to end this and go cry for a little bit. But I'm recording something else tonight that will be up, so I can't get too messed up because I gotta have gotta have my game on for the game. So thank you all again. I'm just gonna double check. Is there anyone? Jen, go stream, Jen, so I can raid you over. Except, I mean, not really. I'm joking, but. Okay, if you're Critical Role nerds like me, tonight they are doing the Elden Ring one-shot on Critical Role, so maybe I'll scream about that later. But if you have topics you'd like to suggest, please let us know. And you all are so wonderful. Thank you so much. I hope I see you next Tuesday D&D, and I hope we can have more spicy and really intense conversations, because this is the stuff I love. This is why I wanted to do this show right here. So you all just made like my night. You made my dream come true tonight for the show. This is what I wanted. I'm gonna stop gushing. I'm Kay. I've been your host. This is David. He's been my co-host. You all are awesome. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.